Hi, hello, and welcome back to the Madness and Meaning podcast. Amanda sent me a message a few days ago wanting to explore the topic of peace. And I think that's going to be such an interesting conversation for so many reasons. I think that my understanding of my own desire of peace has evolved a lot over the years. Being someone who has always identified as a very anxious person, I think the desire of feeling more at peace inside of myself and inside of my mind has always felt enticing, but my journey of actually learning how to get there has been quite tumultuous. And I think that we're going to share a lot of our own stories and insights of this, of the struggles that we face in our pursuit to feel more at peace in our lives and the ways that we attempt to access more peace, especially in a world that is so rampant with worry and anxiety and stress and depression and everything that kind of disrupts our sense of peace. I think a lot of us might be able to say, at least consciously, like, I would love to just be able to sit in silence and be in peace and not worry about anything and just be at peace. But then whenever we have the opportunity to do that, it never ends up happening. Our mind ends up wandering, or we end up finding something to keep ourselves busy. And it's like very obvious, I think, to a lot of us that we are the primary thing getting in the way of our own ability to access peace. And so I'm
Might not
excited
be.
to explore what's going on there. Yeah.
It might some people might not feel that way. They might feel that the world is getting in their way of accessing peace. And
And
that
I
is
think we need
something
to
that
start
we
there.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because,
How is peace accessed?
well, how do we think that we access it?
I think that I think that for a lot of people, the belief system is that peace is accessed once some sort of success is accomplished. Once you've
Mhm.
set out to accomplish something, and it can be different for everybody. It can be a romantic relationship, it can be strong friendships, it can be a
Money
family
in the bank
unit,
account,
money in the bank account, it can be some professional accomplishment of some sort. It can be an educational accomplishment of some sort. And once that's done and checked off the box, and you've been like, and then you can say, I did it, I did the thing, then it's like, exhale. Now I can relax.
yeah. Yeah, almost as if it's kind of under this assumption that in order to achieve that thing or in order to have success, we need to put our peace on hold because having peace in the moment is not productive to having the thing that we think that we want. I think that's an underlying belief we all hold, that our stress and our worry and our dysregulation inside of our bodies is productive to get us things.
And I don't even think that that's conscious. Like, I think that we just can't exhale until the job is done. And I think that I could be just speaking for myself. That is very difficult for me to fully relax until my to-do list is done. Even though it's something that I want, it's like I just can't. There's something really um challenging about allowing myself to do that. Like taking time in the middle of the day, or I'll give an example. Meditation is something that I really want to prioritize in my day because it allows me to get focused. It sets up my routine for the day, and I get so much clarity and insight and perspective and inspiration in meditation. So it almost propels every other activity in my day forward. And I had the hardest time putting that at the front of my day. It always gets pushed to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting how we can come up against this pattern of knowing better and having really strong intentions and reasons for wanting to live our lives in a different way, but that mental understanding and desire doesn't integrate into a new way of being immediately.
So where do you want to go from here? Because we talked about so many different avenues that we could take this
Already.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, where are we going with all this? Bear with us, guys. Um, I would love to start on this idea that this level of consciousness that we can all relate to. And I think you and I have dipped above this level of consciousness in our lives, but we still dip into it too, which is of trying to achieve peace in external things, putting our peace or holding our peace hostage before or until we have some accomplishment or outcome that we've deemed is important to us. And I think a lot of this has to do with this idea that I just spoke to, which is that we think that our withholding of peace is productive. Like if I just woke up and I felt at peace all the time and I prioritized my peace, I didn't worry about things in the future. I didn't worry about the consequences of not doing certain things, et cetera, then like never going to accomplish anything. My whole life is going to fall apart. Like in some way, it doesn't feel safe mentally, but also in our nervous system. Even if we have a way of mentally justifying that we are safe to be at peace. Like, let's just say we have an afternoon and we've accomplished our to-do list, and like there may be some other things to do, but we know we don't need to do them right now, and we know we'll have time to do them later. And it's like, I'm just going to take some time to read a book. But then that doesn't last very long for a lot of us, where our mind starts to wander and we start to feel this like angsty energy to like get up and do something because there's something about being in the moment and being in peace that doesn't feel safe.
I think I think the reason for that is because without realizing it, we're prioritizing something above peace. There's something inside of accomplishing those things that means more than having peace. And it's whatever we believe those things are going to give us. It's the validation we're going to receive, it's the understanding, the recognition, it's the connection, it's whatever our inner child is feeling that it needs most and
Yeah, security.
that it believes it's going to get from that thing. And once it gets it, then it can finally relax and feel at peace on the other side of it. And I think that we just don't realize this driving motivator that is constantly the thing that is propelling every decision that we make, that's actually forcing us to postpone peace when really what we want is peace on the other side of all of this pain and suffering and struggle. But we have to struggle first. We can't allow ourselves to feel peace first.
Hmm.
Like peace is standing in the way of our inner child getting what it wants.
Yeah, I think we all have that programming in some way, shape, or form. For me, my understanding of it comes from my reflection on life experiences that taught me that when I was what I could justify as at peace, like when I wasn't worried about a certain outcome or wasn't worried about anything, was just kind of in the moment, enjoying what was happening right now, that bad things happened or good things were delayed from happening or good things didn't happen as a result of that. And it kind of created this programming that in order to get things that I want or prevent things I don't want from happening to happen, I need to be in struggle. I need to be in worry and trying to figure out like what's going to go wrong and how can I overcome it and constantly trying to overcome something to get to the other side of it with this idea that once I finally get that, then I'll be at peace. Like you said, like it's like once I finally have that thing that I want, then I can relax. But then like how many things have there been throughout my life, your life, our all of our lives, where it's like we had this idea that once we finally got there, we could relax, and then we didn't.
It's That's the entire operating system, right? My inner child has to get the thing that it wants before I can relax. But your inner child is never going to get the thing that it wants if it's relying on things outside of it to get it. And so you're constantly going to be it's going to be a constantly moving goalpost, and that you're something that you're constantly chasing, and you're going to be forever postponing that sense of inner peace that comes on the other side of this thing that's never going to be granted that way anyway. And I think it might be interesting to explore, like, what is peace exactly? Like, what is this nefarious thing that we call inner peace that we're kind of telling ourselves at the end of the day when we really think about it? The thing that we really want is to just be able to feel at peace inside of who we are. What is that? Like, what if you were to describe what that would be?
Mhm. It's To me, it's synonymous with presence, really, which I think is also true for like what is happiness, what is joy. It's also just like being present, it's being content in the moment. And when I think of the opposite of peace, I think about worry and stress and anxiety, which is really anything, any stream of thought that's taking us out of the present moment. Worried about something that could happen in the future, stressing out about something that happened in the past. It's taking us out of what's here and now. Whereas peace is just being in the here and now without having what could happen in the future, what did happen in the past, have any real influence on your experience of now. To a degree that we're just all human and we might have different levels of peace. Like, I don't think that we need to be completely um 100% able to just be like, I don't care about anything that happened in the future or happened in the past and is going to happen in the future in order to access peace. But I think there's a ground of being where it's just like, I'm here and there might be things in the future that could be problematic. And there might have been things in the past that I wish maybe didn't happen, but I'm here. And right here is more important than those things. To me, that feels like peace.
Because when I think about the present moment, the here and now, it's very easy for someone to say, well, I can be in the here and now and still not feel good because what's here and now is sadness or what's here and now is frustration, right? So to
Yes.
me, peace is being in the here and now and recognizing that nothing has to change. Like feeling as though nothing has to change and whatever is taking place right now is perfect.
Yes. Yes. Presence and acceptance have to be
Yeah.
interwoven.
Yeah. And I think that's where it becomes challenging is the acceptance of whatever's present.
Right. I think that's what takes people away from moments
Yes.
that they're trying to be peaceful is, well, I sat down to take time to read or I sat down to meditate and it was chaos.
Yeah.
It was really stressful and uncomfortable. And that's because what they were experiencing and being shown and thinking and feeling in that moment, they were not accepting of it. They were in resistance to whatever was there, and they're associating that it was what was there that wasn't peaceful, but really it was their relationship with what was coming up that was taking away their peace.
How do you shift that? How do you shift being in the present moment and experiencing something that doesn't feel comfortable and creating acceptance around that?
I think you and I have had a lot of practice with a lot of different tools and things of like somatic work and learning how to identify sensation in the body and breathe into it and feel safety inside of what what is the physical contraction that we're labeling as an emotion. You and I have done a lot of work around emotional expression and learning how to meet different parts of us that are sad or angry or depressed or in shame from a higher, more loving part of us and being able to hold space for these more chaotic and uncomfortable emotions in a larger container of love that we have grounded it and have accessed. And I think the common theme around all of this is that we do need to have a ground of well being that we have accessed and that we have an energetic blueprint of that we can come back to when we intend to. And that ground of well being can be contexted in a lot of different ways. If someone has ever done like inner child work, I think that resonates with this idea that we're reparenting the inner child. And so when we're doing inner child work and we're identifying and hearing from a younger part of us, a contraction or an emotional wound or a worry or a fear or a sadness. And then we're hearing it from a more adult perspective, from a more loving presence inside of us. And then we might try talking to that younger part of us or just letting that unresolved part of us know that it's okay. Then we have accessed that ground of well being. If we've ever also just like had the experience of being a space holder for someone else where they're going through something really hard, and there's a part of us that can have empathy for the sadness or the upset that they're in, while also holding a larger container for love for that person, being able to see things with hope, with love, with compassion, and holding a larger container, a larger vision for what's going to be okay for them, then I think we have also accessed that ground of well being in context of conversating with another person who is struggling. And when we have access that with someone else, where we can be that ground of things are going to be okay from this place of love and acceptance, like not being like, stop feeling upset because things are going to be okay. Like, that's not how we want to be with our friends when they're confiding in us. But from that place of like, it makes total sense that you're freaking out and I would be too. And this does really suck. But also, like, I know that you're going to be okay. And you don't have to believe me right now. And you might not even say that you think things are going to be okay, but you just have this presence of holding like things are going to work out for them because they're loved by me, they're supported, like they're amazing, they're beautiful humans, like things are going to work out for them, and I just know it. When we have the context of experiencing that with someone else, and we can also apply that in the context of working with the parts of us that get upset or worked up or stressed out or worried or anxious, then that ground of well-being is a place that we can continually practice having a relationship with, because I think it's there that we practice acceptance. And when we can practice acceptance of different parts of us that we might view as not peaceful, then ironically, that's where we find peace, is in the acceptance of what's not peaceful.
I think the misunderstanding is that there's no discomfort in peace.
Mm, yes.
And
And that's the
that,
paradox.
yeah, exactly. And we spend our entire lives postponing peace so that we can satisfy this inner child's need for whatever we felt like was missing growing up.
Right.
And that once we have it, there will be a lack of discomfort and then we'll feel at peace. And peace is not necessarily that. Peace is not this space of being where you're never sad, you're never in struggle, you're never uncomfortable in any capacity. Peace is the allowance of all of those things, back to acceptance. It's the allowance of whatever the current experience is rather than the pushback against it. And I think that that is where it's truly found.
Yes. There was this insight that I had. I remember like specifically when it happened. It was like 3 or 4 years ago. I was living in Edmonton. I was like on a walk and I just had this insight that dropped in. And I'm sure I've heard it in other contexts before, so I'm not claiming that I made this up, but like it was this idea around happiness not being the absence of sadness. And I remember like really being deep in thought about this idea of happiness, because I think all of us, myself included, had thought that in order to be happy, there had to be no sadness. And in order for me to feel happy, therefore, there had to be nothing to be sad about, which kind of is an impossible
Right.
pursuit in some
Yeah.
way, shape, or form, right? There's always going to be something to be sad about. And I think I was trying to chase circumstantially the least amount of things to be upset about in my life to try to get to this place of peace. And then it was just like, well, what if that's not happiness? What if happiness is the welcoming of sadness or the welcoming of all of it? What if my real happiness is found in my willingness to presence my sadness and whatever else I associate as the opposite of happiness? And I think that's really relevant to all experiences that we're chasing, including peace. Because if we think that peace is the absence of worry and stress, then we're chasing circumstantially a place where there's nothing to ever be worried or anxious about. And like, not gonna happen. It's never going to happen. And we can try to get as close to that as possible. And if you can get there, that's great. Like, I want that for you too, to live a life that circumstantially really works for you, where you don't have to worry about too many things. That would be great for all of us. But realistically, if we're putting this thing that we desire to have, peace, on the back burner until circumstantially everything, all of our ducks are in a row. And then even if we get there, we're going to be afraid of losing it. We're going to be afraid of something else happening that we need to worry about because that's going to take away this peace that we finally found through all this hard work of controlling our circumstances to be that way. And so this backdoor in approach that you and I are talking about and referencing, where we learn to find real acceptance of stress, chaos, sadness, whatever the opposite of peace is, then it's unconditional peace, which is real peace to me. Because if my peace is conditional on there's nothing to worry about, then I'm almost going to be worried that there's something to be worrying about
Right.
in a way.
There's something oddly threatening about letting go of control and letting life come to you. And we were kind of talking about that, like what we're both going through right now in life, and we're both kind of in situations right now where there are circumstances that are out of our control. And when I started doing more spiritual work, I was constantly being told by my spirit guides, if you can't see a decision to make, then there isn't one, and you just have to wait until something comes to you. Or if you don't see the path forward, it's because there isn't one right now. And maybe it's just time for you to sit back and allow it to come to you. Or if you can't figure out how you're going to overcome this thing and make it to the next thing, then that's because it's just not available for you to see right now. And that means you just have to wait, to sit back and let it come to you. And there
So
was always
uncomfortable.
something so panicky about that.
Yes.
Because what if it never comes?
And I want to speak to that because, in my experience of moving through that, I'm not sure if there was much to overcoming that, or moving through a process of that that wasn't just having to do with it takes time and it takes experience. Because there's been so much of uncertainty and different phases of being like uh, faced with the opportunity to surrender, all these different circumstances that you just offered as examples, where I didn't have enough life experience yet to know that things were going to be okay in the uncertainty. And there's still definitely charge around uncertainty in my body, but I can say it's significantly less than when I was 25, 24, 23. Like, it's every year I've gained new life experience to teach me that uncertainty is okay and that surrendering to what I don't know yet is also okay and that I will be safe. And if that is a struggle for anyone that's listening to this, where they can be faced with any semblance of uncertainty or not knowing the answer, not knowing what's next, or whatever version of that is, and feel really uncomfortable inside of that. I think one step that you could take is just taking a moment genuinely just to reflect on the other times in your past where you've been dealt with something similar, and how did it end up going? Because that's always really supportive for me. And I think that my intentionality around reminding myself of all the different moments where I was just like, "Oh my god, what's next? What's the answer? I don't know what to do." And then, like, things just worked out, like, eventually, and reminding myself of that makes those moments where it's happening in the present moment feel a lot less threatening. It doesn't mean that it isn't dysregulating. It definitely is in some ways, but there's a greater understanding and a grounding that I can find of I know from past experience more often I have turned out to be okay. 100% of the time I obviously have turned out to be okay because I'm still here and I'm okay. Um, and so just reminding myself of that every time I get into it, I feel like that truth grounds in even more.
This is where the co-creation process comes in, right? Like our human logical mind wants to come up with a plan because when it has a plan, it feels in control, it feels safe, and there's less uncertainty. But sometimes when you want something that is not necessarily ready to come through or you're not ready to receive it, this is where trust that it's coming to you is required, and it's inside of the allowing that's going to facilitate receiving it in the first place, because there's an energetic shift that has to take place within you in order to be able to receive it and take the next step. And until you can find safety inside of that shift, then it can't. So there's an element of like transformation here internally that's required of you to be able to energetically take on this next step for you that you might not have the capacity to when you're continuously operating under that same like base level, like sympathetic nervous system space of activity. And for me, it took me a really long time of ripping and chasing and forcing and striving and sleepless nights and panic attacks to be like, this is just not working
Yeah,
at
oh my
all.
god, yes.
Like I have made no progress. And
Mhm.
Kelly used this analogy when she was coaching me where I was like, you know that scene in The Lion King is hanging on the ledge and then Scar just goes like this and he
Uh-huh.
falls off. It's like I'm hanging, I don't know why I'm saying this. I was hanging on the ledge and very slowly just lifting my fingers up one by one until I felt safe enough to let go. It just required constantly coming back to this place of pain, hoping to feel peace on the other side of it and realizing the peace never came, and wanting more than anything to just feel peace. And then as
Mhm.
soon as I could let go of the wall and fall, the next step sort of just presented itself to me. And I was like, oh, there
That's
it
right.
is.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is how it works.
Yeah. It
If
is
anyone
how it
needs,
works.
like, some grounding, some security to feel safe inside of this new experience that we're offering to them of surrender, like, I think it is helpful to know that there is guidance, there is clarity, there is support available for us when we surrender. It's not just like, "I'm gonna surrender," and then in that vulnerability, bad things are gonna happen, which I think is our ultimate deepest fear.
How do you determine the difference between surrender and complacency?
It is a really fine line, isn't it? I
Let's
think it's
explore that.
let's explore it, yeah, because I don't know, like, h how to articulate it, but it's different,
I
and it's very clear to me somehow.
Oh, it's clear. It's clear.
It's clear in a way I can't articulate.
For me, I think that complacency is when you know what the action step is and you're not taking it for
Ooh,
whatever
yeah.
reason. Whereas surrender is you don't know. You don't know what the next step is, and it's complete unknown. Like there's no clear next step. And at that point, it's up to you to sit in wait. It's the patience piece and it's the finding peace in the present moment piece of the puzzle.
Hmm.
And to me, that's how I differentiate them.
That's a great example. And I want to get into the nuance of it a little bit because I'm
Okay.
curious your ideas behind this. Because when I hear that, it rings very true. While also there's this other part of me that is putting myself into experiences where I've had the opportunity to surrender and questioning whether I knew what the next step was. I think that there were lots of times where I could have come up with a next step, but none of those next steps felt right. And I think that's where it got really complicated is do these next steps not feel right because for some reason I'm fearing them or I don't want to do them because I'm being complacent and lazy or whatever, or is it because those just aren't the right steps? And I can give you a little bit more context to make this more
Yeah.
understandable. When it came to what we talked about last week, where it was like I want to take some time away from my business. And there was like, well, like there are things I could do. There are so many things that I could do to move my business forward to get me out of this place in my business that I don't like. There are so many things I could do. I just didn't want to do any of them. And then the other option was to just take space, to take a break from it, to step back. And because there were action steps that I knew I could have done, does that mean it was complacent? And to me, it doesn't feel like it.
There's a difference though. What is actually desired, right? Like to me, complacency is there's a very clear action step that's going to move the needle forward for you. And it feels very expansive. And that's what's scary about it. And that's why you're
Yeah.
not doing it because it's going to force you outside of your comfort zone. Whereas you see all of these potential options available to you, but that's not really what you want. And your
Yeah.
conditioning is telling you that you should want to do those things because it's lazy not to. And you're going to be quote unquote complacent if you don't. And ultimately, there is no right or wrong. I just want to put that out there is that we're constantly looking for the right thing, the right decision, the right choice. There is not one.
Mhm.
There's just the choice that you make. And this comes back to the peace component. If you're going to convince yourself that you're making the right choice or the wrong choice, and you have to make sure that you're not making the wrong choice so that you can make the right choice so that you can feel at peace on the other side of it, then um that whole misunderstanding that there is a right and wrong is driving this continuous place of pain and suffering ultimately. When you can see that it doesn't matter what choice you make, you'll learn from it regardless. It's much easier to access peace in the moment.
Yes. Yeah. I love that we explored that nuance of it because that you're articulating exactly what I have felt is true, where there can be options available as next steps, but there's ones that, for lack of a better way of describing it, feel expansive and some that feel contracting. And it's the ones that feel contracting that we're trying to tell ourselves we should do,
Yes. How do you
right?
tell the difference between an expansive step and an expansive feeling and a contractive feeling? It's
Because
so hard.
it is because you can't mentally do it.
No,
Because
you can't.
if you try to mentally justify like is this an expansive step, then you could probably find reasons to justify that it is, even if that's not true. Like for example, I'm just going to go right into my own example because this is our conversation that we had a few weeks ago, which is where, you know, I was reaching this point in my business where I wanted to take a step back because I was not seeing any progress with things and blah, 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 blah. And you made some really great suggestions of things that I could do, which is like reaching out to local communities and like getting in front of them and everything. And in my mind, I'm like, that does make sense. And in some ways, I can justify that that would be expansive. because it would push me out of my comfort zone. It would get me in front of new people. It would allow me to be in, be in community. And like there was so much about it that felt like it was going to challenge me in a way that would have been positive and also could have very well led me to some positive outcomes as well, possibly. But everything in me was like, no. When I was out of my mind and in my body, it was just like like really contracted. And I think a part of that was the fear. Definitely, like a fear of being seen, a fear of putting myself out there, a fear of being rejected, et cetera, et cetera. And all of that is very true. And I think there would be aspects of me moving forward with it anyways, despite the fact that that contraction was there, could have been expansive. But beyond all of that, there was still a heaviness to it that like it just made me want to shut down even at the idea of doing it. And like everything in me was just like it just felt like I would be clawing my way to doing like to making the phone call to the local gym and like everything about just doing that felt like running a marathon.
I'm trying to anchor into how to determine the difference between something that's expansive and something that's scary, like something that's
Yes.
contractive, because there's fear on both sides. And
Yes.
so you can't really determine it based on that. I really think I think you have to, it's trial and error. I
Yes.
don't think that you can really say an answer definitively in words to help somebody understand. I think they have to learn for themselves because it's a felt sense. And then on top of that, there's a trust that's developed over time to be able to identify it or not, and you're still going to make mistakes.
100%.
Like, this is super random, but I had a mentor that I'm working with suggested that I read this book, and it was an automatic, like, no, I do not want to read that book. There's something about it I don't like. I don't like some of the undertones. I don't like the language. She suggested it again, and I felt this knot in my stomach, and I was like, that's my intuition. I trust my intuition. It says no. And then she's like, okay, well, I'm being told something different, so I'm just going to leave it to you to determine for yourself what you want to do. And I went into meditation and I checked in a different state of being. I was relaxed, I was open, and I asked, what can you tell me about reading this book? And they were like, oh, I think that you're going to get a lot out of it and there's going to be something on the other side of it for you. And I was like, oh, so I misread all of that. And I thought I was
Yes.
an expert at this point. And that's again coming back to there is no right or wrong. There's just experience accumulated over time.
Yes. Yeah. And I think you did something really brilliant, which is you taking the space to revisit it outside of the moment that it was originally presented, where there was like a trigger behind it, so that you can do a more honest check-in, not a filtered or biased, opinionated check-in around it that happened immediately in the moment. And I think we could all learn from that practice of just like giving ourselves space to really feel into our truth. Because we're not going to be able to always access what's true for us in a moment where we're being presented with something for the first time or however many times it takes. But to come to a place of intentional time, you said you did it in meditation or whenever you're feeling more just like unattached to anything, and then just bringing in like, how do I really feel about this? And what is my insight around what this experience could really look like beyond what I initially projected onto it? I think that can be very telling.
Yeah.
So, as we're identifying that there is this mode of operation of trying to find peace through putting it on the back burner, trying to have some kind of accomplish or reach some sort of circumstance before we can feel at peace, but that's not working, like, where do we go from there? Like, how do we find a different way of accessing peace? And what is the process of even allowing ourselves to use that new way of finding peace?
Well, I guess first, you really have to come to the realization that what you're doing is not working and that you're continuing to struggle and fight, and that the peace that you're striving for is just never becoming available to you. And now it becomes a process of turning inwards where you've been looking outside of you in order to force an outcome or circumstance that would allow you to access that feeling of peace. And so now the journey is moving in a different direction. It's moving in. And so now it comes down to exploring for yourself what is required of me to access peace now. Because if peace is never going to become available in some future outcome, then it's available now. And if I can't feel it now, why?
Mm, that's a good question.
Yeah. And so that's where I would start and exploring, okay, what is blocking me in this moment from accessing peace? We know the answer is nothing. Nothing is blocking you from accessing peace. There's something threatening about opening up to peace because perhaps in opening up to peace, there's a thought that's telling you, if I do this now, then I won't get to A, B, C, and D on the other side of it, or something like that. And so there's gonna be discomfort that bubbles up to the surface as soon as you allow yourself to do something that you've never allowed yourself to do previously. You're asking yourself to operate in a completely different way. And discomfort is going to be a part of that process. The discomfort is not taking you away from peace. And I think that's the biggest get, is that as soon as we feel discomfort in any way, shape, or form, we freak the F out.
Yes.
Peace is accessed inside of discomfort just as much as it's accessed outside of discomfort. Peace is there regardless. It's about learning how to feel that discomfort and know that it's okay. And
Mm,
when you can allow that experience to take place inside of you, peace is accessed in the midst of it. It feels counterintuitive and counterproductive, and because we're so used to seeing it differently.
mhm,
And so I think it's sort of like being on the white water rapids. That's what my guides are showing me. And it's like you can't necessarily paddle through that. You just kind of have to let the rapids take you with them wherever you're going to be guided. And so you're going to be on this kind of journey of emotional ups and downs as you learn to recalibrate to what that's actually like when you're used to avoiding it.
mhm. I
And
want
it's
to
a,
off
yeah, sorry.
I just want to offer this idea as you're talking about learning how to be inside of discomfort, that a big part of that is learning how to be with the discomfort beyond the story about it, which is getting a little bit more into somatic work and stuff like that. But I think what you're speaking to here is when someone is wanting to access peace, but they're being confronted with discomfort, a lot of that discomfort is happening in the way that they're contexting it is happening in the mind, whether they are thinking about things that could happening that they should be doing instead, that their mind is just going haywire, and they're coming up with stories about what's going on, and they're experiencing that discomfort through the mind, through their thoughts, through the stories that they're telling themselves. And so a big part of this process is learning how to go beyond the mind, dropping more fully into the body and just noticing what it feels like now. Like, what is it like to just be in your existence, to be in your body now? Because when we can drop out of the story about what's going on and really be with what's actually here, the context of what we're calling discomfort is going to change. Because then it might just be like, okay, this discomfort is really like I'm tensing my shoulders, or this discomfort is like this heaviness inside of my stomach, or this like pulley energy inside of my chest, inside of my heart that feels like my heart is ramping up. And when we can be out of the story of it and more into the physical sensation of it, then I think inherently it's a lot easier for us to access that sense of acceptance of what is, because we realize that what is not really that bad. It's just like a little bit of, and depending on the person, of course, there's going to be a window of tolerance, and we're not going to get into that whole conversation of somatic work, but really, somatic work is so powerful because it teaches us that the thing that we're calling discomfort is not that uncomfortable.
Thank you so much for illuminating those nuances. What we're describing is not a one session process. This is a very elongated over time process. And I think part of it is as soon as you give yourself permission to open up to the potential that peace is currently available for you, you're going to notice that your mind is going to start fighting back. And when you buy into the thoughts, that's when you get carried away inside of them. And that's where the discomfort increases because you're telling yourself, I should be doing this, this, and that, or this is blocking me from this, or it shouldn't be this way. And when you're buying into those thoughts as your truth, then you're taken down that path and the discomfort increases. When you can see that that's just your mind actually extremely threatened by the prospect of finding peace, then you can be a passive observer of your mind freaking out and not allowing it to take you along for the ride with it. And that's when it becomes easier to sink into the body and become the observer of the experience rather than the cause of it or the participant of it. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense?
Making
Yeah,
perfect sense to me.
as soon as your mind starts racing and spiraling, that is an indication that you actually are very threatened by the concept of peace.
Hmm. And I think that's a really great takeaway just to allow people to experiment with inside of their own lives is when they are in a moment of feeling not at peace, can they just take a moment to explore the idea that the only reason they're not at peace is because their mind is threatened by it?
Isn't that interesting?
And what will that change for you in the moment? If you're able to bring in that new understanding of it's not that I'm at peace because this problem and that problem and this thing that I haven't figured out yet, but I'm not at peace because my mind associates not my mind associates being at peace with not having what I want or some other kind of threat. And if you can realize that that is the context that this lack of peace is happening inside of, and also be open to the idea of, and that's not accurate. Like that is an old conditioning of I need to withhold peace in order to get what I want, or if I'm at peace, bad things happen. Then you can start to open up to this idea or this new way of seeing your present moment, seeing your current circumstances, where it's not that they're in the way, or it's not that you need to get anywhere other than where you are in order to be at peace. It's that you need to get out of your own way of accessing what's already here that you just haven't felt safe accessing up until now.
I think it's also important to recognize that peace is a felt sense. You can't think like I guess you could think a peaceful thought, but it's the thought that evokes the feeling of peace within you. It's in order to access peace, you have to feel comfortable being in your physical body, feeling things. And if that's not something that you're used to doing, then it is going to feel threatening at first
Very,
because all of a sudden you're going to start feeling things that you've been suppressing and running from and avoiding and rejecting. And those things are going to come to the surface, and you might have to move through those first and find a sense of peace inside of that experience to recognize that it's safe before like true peace can really be accessed inside of that. there's a bit of a journey to get there depending on who you are and what your history is and what your conditioning is and your mode of operatum. I feel like I said that a few weeks ago.
Mode of operatum. I like it. I never questioned it. I thought that was an actual
Oh,
thing.
is that a word? Okay, then I'm
It
right.
probably might be. I
Um,
don't know.
Mode of operating. Um, and allowing your process to be whatever it is. Because it's not going to be like a, got it, I found peace, I did the
Mhm.
thing. It's not probably going to be that way. It's going to be a very slow, gradual deepening into what that really feels like for you. And it's going to feel different every single day.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to offer this one last point of exploration for people to play with in their lives, in addition to being willing to explore in moments where you're not peaceful, if that lack of peace is only happening because your mind wants it to be that way. In addition to that, I would love people to kind of live into this inquiry of what if peace is not the absence of worry? Or whatever word resonates as lack of peace for you. What if my peace is not the absence of anxiety? What if my peace is not the absence of discomfort? And just live into that in moments where you're noticing that you're feeling discomfort or you're feeling at unease in some way. And just bring in that inquiry. What if my peace isn't found in me getting rid of these feelings? What if peace is not the absence of this thing that I'm feeling right now? What if peace can actually be found inside of this? And better yet, what if my peace is actually found in my willingness to welcome how I am right now, to welcome this discomfort, to welcome the anxiety, to welcome the worry? What if that actually is the key that unlocks my peace? And just live into that and see what is that experience like for you, and what do you learn through that living inquiry?
What if peace is feeling me, feeling
That,
who I am in this moment, and allowing me to be me?
yeah, without a story about it, without a judgment on it.
Love that.
I love it too.
Is there anything else you want to add to this?
No, I
I
don't
feel
think
like we
so.
explored some really cool stuff with this conversation.
Me too.
We would like to invite anyone listening or watching to explore this for yourselves if this is a new concept for you. And we would love to hear from you if you received any insight or fresh perspective from this. And we'll see you next week.